I never imagined a single moment at a wedding could turn into the kind of memory you replay for years, but when his father-in-law leaned across the table, smirked, and called him an idiot loud enough for half the guests to hear, something inside me snapped, not out of anger, but out of a kind of quiet, exhausted clarity. I watched him sit there, trying to swallow the humiliation, pretending it didn't sting, pretending he didn't notice the way people looked away awkwardly. And as I watched the man I loved shrink into himself on what was supposed to be one of the happiest days of his life, I realized I couldn't stay silent anymore. So I revealed a truth, one they never expected, one that rewrote the story they thought they knew, and in that moment, their whole world shifted. If you've ever seen someone you care about get torn down by the very people who should lift them up, you'll understand why I did what I did. And if stories like this resonate with you, feel free to like and subscribe. It truly helps me share more real-life stories with you. I think the moment everything truly shifted for me wasn't when his father-in-law called him an idiot at the wedding, but rather the quiet second right afterward, when I looked at the man I loved and saw something in him break in a way I had never seen before. It was small, almost invisible to anyone else, just a tightening in his jaw, and the way his eyes dropped for a heartbeat too long, but to me it felt like watching a foundation crack beneath a house you had spent years building together. I had always known his family wasn't easy. They carried their pride like armor and used sarcasm as if it were a kind of family tradition. But I didn't grow up in a home like that. My parents were gentle, maybe even too gentle at times, but they taught me that kindness wasn't weakness. Maybe that's why I was always so protective of him, even in the early days when we first met. He had this quiet energy, the kind people overlook until they need something solid to lean on. I guess that's what drew me to him. I could sense a kind of vulnerability beneath his calm surface, but I never understood how deep those scars went until much later. In the beginning, everything felt simple. We'd spend evenings talking about our childhoods, our dreams, the things we wished we had done differently. He rarely mentioned his father, and when he did, it was always in passing, short comments, half smiles that didn't reach his eyes. I didn't push because I knew what it was like to keep certain memories folded away, protected from the world. But over time, I started noticing small things that unsettled me. The way he tensed whenever his father called. The sudden change in his voice when he talked to his family, as if he were shrinking himself to fit the role they expected. The jokes they made at his expense, disguised as playful teasing but holding a sharpness I couldn't ignore. I remember one dinner months before the wedding when his sister laughed and said he had always been the slow one growing up. Everyone at the table chuckled, including him, but I saw the flash of embarrassment before he forced a smile. I wanted to speak up then, but I didn't. Maybe that was my mistake, staying silent for too long, hoping things would change on their own. The tension grew as the wedding approached. His father insisted on being involved in every detail, not because he cared, but because he needed to control everything. It was subtle at first, little comments about the venue, the flowers, the guest list, but soon it became overwhelming. I watched the man I loved become smaller with each passing day, bending himself out of shape to keep peace with a man who seemed to thrive on belittling him. I tried to support him, to be patient, but part of me wondered why he allowed it. What I didn't understand at the time was that he had spent his whole life trying to earn his father's approval, even though it was never freely given. It all built toward that wedding day. The morning was beautiful, soft sunlight pouring into the room as I got ready, and for a moment I felt hopeful, like maybe this day could be something good. But the moment his father walked in, everything shifted. He made small comments here and there, about the cost, the guests, even the music, but I forced myself to ignore them. I wanted our day to stay intact. Then came the reception. A simple toast, a moment that should have been filled with joy. Instead, his father smirked, lifted his glass, and casually called him an idiot, as if it were an inside joke everyone was expected to laugh at. And they did. The room echoed with uncomfortable laughter, but all I could hear was the sound of his dignity being stripped away. I felt my chest tighten, not just from anger but from a kind of helpless sorrow, the kind that settles in when you realize someone you love has been hurting far longer than they've ever admitted. I looked at him, this man who had given me so much of himself, and I saw the child he once was, trying to please a father who never cared enough to see his worth. It broke something in me too. In that moment, I understood that staying silent wasn't kindness, it was complicity. And I knew there was something I needed to say, something I had learned months earlier, something that would change everything about how his family saw him. But revealing it would also mean crossing a line we could never uncross. As I stood there watching him force a laugh he didn't feel, surrounded by people who were supposed to love him, I realized I was standing at a crossroads. Stay quiet and let the cycle continue, or speak a truth that would shatter the fragile image they had spent years building. And as the evening went on, as his father grew louder and his smile grew thinner, I felt the answer forming inside me, steady and unstoppable, the kind of truth that doesn't ask for permission. But saying it would come with consequences I wasn't sure either of us was ready for. And that was the thought that haunted me as the night came to a close, whether breaking their illusion would free him, or break us instead. I didn't sleep that night after the wedding. I lay beside him in the dark, listening to his breathing, noticing how even in sleep he carried the same tension in his shoulders, as if years of trying to be enough had carved themselves into his muscles. I kept thinking about the secret I had discovered months earlier, the one I had told no one, not even him. His mother had pulled me aside one afternoon, long before the wedding preparations began, and in a rare moment of honesty she confessed that his father had always been harder on him because he wasn't biologically his. A truth kept hidden to protect reputations, or pride, or maybe just habit. She had said it softly, her voice trembling, as if she already regretted sharing it. And I had carried that truth alone, unsure whether revealing it would destroy the last threads holding their family together. But when I watched him being humiliated at his own wedding, I realized the family wasn't held together by love, it was held together by silence and fear. And silence was hurting him more than the truth ever could. The morning after, I found him sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee growing cold in his hands. His eyes looked distant, not angry, just tired in a way I had never seen. I sat across from him and waited for him to speak, but he didn't. Eventually he asked, "Was I overreacting last night?" And something inside me broke again, because it wasn't just that he had been insulted, it was that he had been conditioned to believe he deserved it. I told him gently that what happened wasn't okay, and he nodded like he had heard those words before but never truly believed them. And that's when I felt the weight of the secret I'd been carrying. I told him we needed to talk, and even before I spoke, he sensed something in my tone. I watched his face shift from confusion to a quiet, bracing fear, the kind you feel when you know life is about to tilt. I told him what his mother had told me. I expected anger or disbelief or some kind of explosion. Instead, he went completely still. He didn't speak for a long time, and I let the silence sit between us because rushing him would have been cruel. When he finally exhaled, it was shaky, like releasing years of pressure he had never acknowledged. Then he whispered, "That makes sense," with a sadness so deep it made my chest ache. He began listing memories, not angrily, not dramatically, just small moments from his childhood that suddenly made more sense. Times when his father treated his siblings differently, times when he was punished for mistakes that others made without consequence, times when he overheard comments he couldn't fully understand but felt cut by anyway. It wasn't rage I saw in him, it was grief. Grief for the boy he had been. Grief for the man he had tried so hard to become for someone who never intended to love him properly. And as he spoke, I realized the secret hadn't shattered him, it clarified him. It connected pieces he had been trying to fit together his whole life. The real breaking point came when he said, "I kept thinking if I tried harder, he'd finally be proud of me." And then, so quietly it almost hurt to hear, but he was never really my father. I reached for his hand, and for the first time in days, he didn't pull away. We sat there like that for a long time, two people navigating the wreckage of a truth neither of us asked for but now had to live with. Later that week, he decided he needed to speak to his mother. I didn't go with him. Some journeys have to be made alone. He came back hours later looking drained but lighter. He told me she had cried, apologized, and admitted she had been too afraid to tell him. He didn't yell or blame her, he just asked for the truth, and she finally gave it. The hardest part came next, confronting his father. He didn't go there for revenge, he went for closure. He told him he knew, and that the wedding insult had been the final line he wouldn't allow to be crossed. His father tried to dismiss it, to minimize the damage the way he always had, but something had changed in him. For the first time, he didn't shrink. He didn't apologize for existing. He simply said, "I deserved better," and walked away before the argument could twist into something uglier. When he came home that evening, he didn't look triumphant. He looked free. There's a kind of healing that doesn't look like joy at first. It looks like exhaustion, like laying down a burden you've carried so long you forgot it was heavy. Over the next few weeks, our home felt different. He laughed more. He stood taller. He allowed himself to feel things fully instead of swallowing them to keep the peace. And in that space, we found each other again, not as two people trying to survive someone else's expectations, but as two adults choosing each other with clearer eyes. The wedding day had been painful, but in hindsight, it marked the beginning of his becoming. He once told me he felt like he had been rebuilt from the inside out, not by anger but by truth. And if I learned anything from all of it, it's that sometimes the truth doesn't break a family, it reveals who was truly holding it together. In the end, the choice he made wasn't to stay or leave, but to set boundaries that protected his peace. And watching him do that taught me that healing isn't loud, it's quiet, steady, and deeply human. As for the secret that shattered them, it also set him free. And maybe that was the most honest wedding gift I could have given him.